If you were a huge fan of those books that we read in middle school that were only written in text messages, and now you're an adult who spends too much time on Slack, do I have the book for you? The book is Several People Are Typing, and you'd be surprised at how good it is. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jordan, and I talk about the books that I've been reading lately when I'm not making content about AI on my other channel. If there are books that you'd love to see me cover, let me know in the comments. But let's get into Several People Are Typing, because I originally read this book in fall of 2022 and just reread it last week, and it's somehow better than when I read it the first time. Several People Are Typing is a book by Calvin Kasilke. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it is about a man named Gerald. He is an employee at a PR company that works with just the wildest pet food related brands, I suppose. He is kind of a slacker. He's certainly not, at the top of the company. He's mostly there to get a paycheck, which, we get it. And he accidentally has his consciousness uploaded to Slack. So this book is entirely written as Slack conversations. Hence the reference to books like TTYL, and I can't remember what the other ones were called that are only written in text and emojis. In case you're wondering what happens to his body while his consciousness has been uploaded to Slack, it's still at his apartment. And so he has his friend from work come by daily to help manage that. He refers to it as cat sitting, which is hilarious to me. And over time, Gerald has to figure out A, how to get himself back into his own body, but B, how to stop Slackbot as it realizes that escaping the, I would say mortal coil, but I guess online coil of being trapped in Slack, how to keep Slackbot from entering his own body and becoming a person, leaving him trapped there forever. So that's a wild premise for a book. Throughout all of this, he's still working. He's still doing his job. In fact, his boss thinks that he's joking when he talks about how his consciousness has been uploaded to Slack, and thinks that he's just making an insane joke for the purposes of being able to work from home, and then just doesn't really question it anymore, which both feels very pre-pandemic in terms of how people thought about work from home, but also feels like you read the 4-hour work week and did it the wrong way, instructions unclear, uploaded my brain to Slack so that I could work from home instead of coming into the office. The first time I read this was about 2 years into the pandemic, and I think for me it was also at the peak of God, get me off of Slack, I hate this time. And so I think it certainly resonated with me then, but the Slack format was probably a little bit irritating, because I spent all day on Slack, and usually when I read books it's to get away from that, and instead I was just doing Slack on paper. I've read it now, and I think I like it better because I've intentionally spent less time on Slack, but also because I think on the second read of most books you can get past the original plot and start to interrogate some of the themes of the book, which in this case are really interesting to me. It reminds me a lot of Everything Everywhere All at Once, in that it's very absurdist on its face, obviously. He has his consciousness uploaded to Slack, but there's also conversations that are had within Slack that are just hilarious, out of context, irreverent, and then just stop and you never find out what happens after. But it's also interspersed with commentary on late stage capitalism and the meaning of life and work and ableism and sexuality, actually, which I did not expect from this book. And I think that because of that, it ends up being this really interesting, I wouldn't even say critique, but satire of late stage capitalism, what it's like to work in 2024, your relationship with your company and your boss, and the fact that he's still working when his brain has been uploaded to Slack, and this should be a huge crisis, and also his body would die without his friend coming by, and that's just not, it's like cat sitting, it's it's yeah, I still have to put this brand book together in order to get paid next week. The fact that that is his focus feels like it should be insane, and yet in 2024 I feel like there are a million examples of people who are working while they're sick, while they're potentially in a hospital, while they're dealing with really, really heavy stuff, and that's just normal for us, even though it shouldn't be. The premise, of course, requires you to suspend disbelief, so, you know, we can disabuse ourselves of normal world rules in a lot of ways, which does make it, I guess, easier and harder to see some of the like bugs that come into Slack as the story progresses, including one employee who can like only communicate in the form of like dogs howling, which is always fun. It's kind of like watching a show like Suits, where from episode 1 you're like, this premise isn't possible, but sure, let's just go with it, and we can base everything on that being the baseline. But I think that it does certainly make for many moments where even with that as the baseline, you're still kind of like head tilt. Like, it took a one conversation, maybe one or two conversations, to convince his friend that his brain had been uploaded to Slack, and then they're just like, well, okay, then, like, it's something where you're sitting there like, okay, even if we're saying that, like, from a sci-fi fantasy perspective, this is possible, it's wild that your friend is just like, cool, because clearly this isn't supposed to be possible or normal or whatever in this world. It's not like a Ready Player One situation where it's like, this is the norm and everyone does this. I wonder what would happen to me if one of my friends did that. I'd probably call a wellness check on them, which maybe he should have done first, although that might be hard to communicate in the form of Slack. I don't know. It also actually reminds me a lot of the late stage capitalism of brand Twitter accounts becoming not even like woke, but like having philosophical and like epistemological discussions. And then I'm thinking of the Steakums account at the moment, and then ending every like tweet thread with Steakum bless, which was like hilarious in that way, where everyone feels very resigned to their fate of like, yep, this is how this works now, this is what life is like. So I highly recommend reading it. It's a really quick read. I think it took me less than 2 hours to get through because it's just all Slack messages, so it won't take you very long. I'd probably check it out from your library first, because it is a book that I think a lot of people would read for fun and maybe not revisit the second time, which is totally cool. I would give it probably a 4 out of 5 stars, only because the -1 star is mostly because I spend too much time on Slack even now, having intentionally back off of that. And so reinserting myself into Slack is like not the most enjoyable thing, but I love the format. And if you have read it, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But otherwise, I'll see you on the next one. I'm really speedrunning that because the battery on my camera is dying.